Hello, this is Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In this class, I discuss Course Study 1 for the AS syllabus of 2024-26 for the Cambridge Board, which is the Dement and Kleitman Sleep and Dream Study. What I'm going to do in this class is go over a few types of questions that come in the paper from this study, both for paper 1 and for paper 2. I have some model answers written out here, and I will not just read out the answers to you, rather I will explain to you how these answers are written. What I notice is students come to me for tuition. I'm a private tutor by profession, and when they come, they have a very good idea of the content in the syllabus, because honestly speaking, the content is not very difficult for you to read and understand for yourself. Of course, there is clarification and explanation required at certain places, and I do help out students with that. But students learn much of the content in the school itself or by themselves, by reading the studies for themselves. Where students lack is in the ability to answer exam questions. So in my opinion, tuition classes should be all about writing answers, practicing exam skills, because I can't emphasize enough that knowing the content well and then reading it, rereading it multiple times, assuming that is all that is required for being able to write the exam well, is a very poor strategy. In my classes, students write answers, I correct them. We have a document, the student and I, we have a shared document on which we both work in every class. The student writes answers, I comment on those answers, and then the student improves the answers. That's the only way of being prepared for the exam, be it your AS or A levels course. As I've mentioned earlier, going through the content repeatedly is not going to help you to answer questions in the paper. Now, because this is a YouTube video, we can't collaborate on writing answers. So what I decided instead was that I will have some good answers to present in front of you, and I will go through some tips and tricks of how you're supposed to write these answers. Actually, more than tips and tricks, actual strategies of writing these answers is what I will discuss. So I've made sure that in this lesson, I have some descriptive questions, some evaluative questions, and some research method questions, which can come from the Dement and Kleitman study for papers 1 and 2. Now, the possibility of the type of questions that could be asked is huge, because every study has numerous elements in its content and in the research method used. So, of course, there's no predicting exactly which questions will come. Psychology is not that type of subject where you can have a question bank that you learn from or memorize from, and then you have only those questions in the paper. It's not like that at all. Also, there are just too many past papers available for practice of Dement and Kleitman in particular, because it's a study that's continuing from the older syllabus. So, of course, one short video does not permit me to discuss all possible questions that have come in past papers. So what I've done for this video is I've selected a few questions. These are from past papers, just to show you which type of questions come and what different strategies you need to answer different questions. If you've learned the Dement and Kleitman study well, that is, you've learned the content well, this lesson will serve as a revision also for you, because many evaluative and procedural points are discussed in this, and it will help you to understand how to put what you've learned into your answers. I know this introduction is long, but that is because this is my first video for the course studies. I will be putting up more such videos. In that, we'll get straight to the point. Okay, so today, let's begin with Dement and Kleitman practice. Okay, in one of the papers, the question that was asked was, name the technique used to measure brain activity. When we have 1 markers like these, and we have been asked to name something, If you're totally new to paper 1, you should know that this is known as a command term. Whatever you're asked to do in the question is indicated by a command term. So name in this case is the command term, and this is the marks that you would get if you write a correct answer. You need to consider both of these when you're answering. A name command term demands that you straight away answer what is asked in the question, strictly in a word or two, whatever is required, and not write complete sentences or give any explanations. And evaluation, definitely not. It's a very straight to the point answer which you have to write. For a list of command terms that could be used to formulate questions in your paper, you can refer to the syllabus. I cannot emphasize how important it is to go through the entire syllabus before beginning with the course, but that discussion would be long, so I'm not going through it right now. Okay, the technique used to measure brain activity for Dement and Kleitman is electroencephalography. Now the FAQ for this answer is, do we have to write the full form of EEG? Well, don't be lazy. Write the full form, learn the full form. You're learning psychology, and what are you learning? Why are you learning only EEG? Why don't you know the whole name? Students have become very wary of learning full terms when they see that spellings are difficult. I don't know why. So yes, you should write the full name, and in the bracket you could write EEG. Another frequently asked question is, do we have to write electroencephalogram or electroencephalograph or electroencephalography? Actually, the technique is called electroencephalography. The machine is electroencephalogram, and the output of that machine is an electroencephalograph. But I know that becomes very technical, so it's absolutely acceptable if instead of this you would use any of the other terms. That is all I can advise for this type of question. Let's look at the next one. Identify one reason for using this technique to measure brain activity. In paper 1, you'll get to see a lot of questions which come in sets. So the first we've seen is 1A, and the second one follows that. Here they've asked for one reason. Now when they ask for one reason and they've asked identify, it is a very limited response again that is required. It is a little more than just naming something, because they wanted to identify means they wanted to state completely what they've asked for. But of course, you can always look at the marks for better indication and understanding. The marks, what they help you understand is, if it was a 2 marks question, you would have to explain for. Then in that case, the command term would have been explain. But here it's just identify. So they just want you to state the reason without getting into too many details. That is what identify indicates. I will, just to demonstrate to you how an identify question has to be answered differently from an explain question, show you both sides, how to answer identify, and what if it was an explain question, then how we should have answered. In identify, we just say it would help distinguish between the REM and NREM stages of sleep for the researchers. If it was an explain question for the same, I would have answered, because the researchers wanted to identify in which stage of sleep dreaming activity occurs more frequently. So that is how I would have explained it. Because, why, what was the reason? In that sense, I would have elaborated further. Here they've just asked to identify, so I give a very limited response that okay, they wanted to distinguish the 2 stages of sleep. But why they wanted to do that is not something that I discuss here. Okay, another question is, outline one of the dreams reported when vertical eye movement was recorded. Now one thing I would point out, which would seem very obvious to some, that when they ask for one dream, you answer with strictly one dream. Some students totally miss the point. What they do is they just see the marks And because they are not detailed, somewhere I think they don't learn the content in that much detail, so they know how to answer in one line. They have no idea how to expand or elaborate. That's because of lack of practice. They've just learned the content from the textbook. They've never practiced writing answers. So what they do to justify the second mark, they would just put in another dream, though it was not asked for. If you've learned the Dement and Kleitman study already, you know that there were 3 vertical dreams which are given as examples in the report of the study. One is of a man operating a hoist and looking upward a cliff. One is of a man playing basketball, and one is of a man climbing stairs. So there are 3 possible dreams of vertical movement that you could report. Now, just because you're able to formulate one in only one line does not mean you negate what is given in the question, and just to make it appear as if you've written something substantial for 2 marks, you give 2 dreams. What will happen when you do that is, the examiner is going to see 1 dream is asked for, you've given 2. So supposing this was the end of the first one and then you've stated another one, so then you talk about climbing stairs. They're simply going to ignore what you've written second. So you are going to end up getting 1 mark only. You're not going to get a second mark just because you've written something over there. That is not how marking works in the Cambridge A levels. Okay, some of you all are coming from state boards, so I understand you all have this advice coming to you from previous years. Some of your teachers might have told you, write something, write anything, write something at least in the paper. Don't let it go, don't let it look like it's very less. That does not work over here. Okay, so you have no option if you want to score well but to practice writing the answers, know how to write different type of answers, looking at the question and learning the skill of explaining and elaborating on what you've written. Otherwise you have to settle for 1 mark, because writing anything else is going to do you no good. So for this answer, you can see in the model, 1 participant saw themselves throwing basketballs at a hoop. I don't leave it at that, because in the report also they haven't left it at that. They have further elaborated by saying they saw themselves looking up at the loop and then downwards to pick another ball. These answers are called AO1 answers. They are purely descriptive. There's nothing that I had to think critically from my own mind, or nothing that I had to apply to a scenario to answer as such. I simply had to write what I have learned in the content. If you are having difficulty answering these questions, no doubt there is a lack of exam skill behind it. But one more indication that you get from that is, somewhere you have gone through the content but you haven't learned it closely or in too much details. You haven't been thorough in learning your content. And especially that gets indicated if you're not able to answer question C properly. So you only know, okay, someone was throwing basketballs. Perhaps that is how you have learned it. You have learned it in a haste, without reading fully what was said about that dream. So if you're having troubles, understand from this that you need to be deeper in the way you go through the content. That is why also it is very important to practice writing answers, because then only you catch your mistakes. You realize where you are prone to making errors and you can correct yourself before you go to the exam and you write something absolutely wrong over there. Okay, so make a habit out of practicing answers. This is yet another descriptive question. AO1 type, assessment objective 1 description. So again you have to write what you've learned in the syllabus. Common mistakes in this question is, this is a procedure related question. Students will not write sequentially. I've spoken about this in another video also. They'll not go step by step in what they're writing, resulting in a very confusing answer. Students do not realize that undoubtedly you get marks for giving 5 points. Like if it's a 5 marker, you're asked to describe. Describe just means you don't give any evaluation. You just write down what you've learned in the book. When it's a 5 marker, undoubtedly the mark scheme is such that for writing 5 points which are unique and of course which are relevant to what is asked, you get 5 marks. But developing a habit of writing anyhow, haphazardly, let me write whatever comes in my mind first and then let me write later something that actually I should have written before, like sequentially, that habit is very bad for you. You might not lose marks here because of that habit. It's a short question. There is no criteria for a 4 or 5 mark that's asking you to organize your answer well. But that habit is detrimental to yourself. Because if that is how you're going to write, you will make a habit of writing that way even in your 10 markers, where being well organized is indirectly a part of the criteria for scoring. And you will make a bad habit of writing this way in 10 marker for paper 2 as well. And next year, especially in your A2, when you have to write detailed essays, 10 markers again, and detailed designer studies again, which are of a higher level because they are in A levels, not in AS, you will not have good writing practices. It is when for the short answers that you take care of how to write that your skill develops and it helps you in the longer answers. So don't take any answer casually for granted or just for the sake of writing you have to write. Why not develop your skills while practicing every answer? And why not write correctly in a way that makes the subject look interesting to you also? When you write logically or in a flow, you also enjoy what you're writing. Try it out and see. When you just write randomly, just because you have to meet some criteria, some requirements for marks, you don't enjoy the process. You feel like a robot who has just mugged up some facts and has to spill it out. In fact, nowadays even robots think more logically, isn't it? So don't take that approach which makes things difficult for you only in every way. The answer here is simple. You have to write from very carefully reading the question from the point where participants were fitted with electrodes to the EEG. Another obvious but common mistake that students make here is to write from wherever in the procedure that they want to. Because they don't read carefully, because they are stressed out during the exam, they haven't practiced writing answers, that's why they are stressed, and so they just read, okay, procedure, okay, Dement and Kleitman, done. I'm just going to describe the procedure. In the process, if they've asked write from when they were fitted with electrodes, they're going to write something from even before they were fitted with electrodes. And again, if you're writing something from before, which is not asked for in the question, it's just going to be ignored by the examiner. It's a sheer waste of your time. The examiner does not want to see, the examiner does not want to read questions that are, the answers which are irrelevant to the question. So why are you writing that? I mean, what purpose is it serving you? Okay, so don't write those answers and waste your time. Make sure you write according to what is written. And when you will be able to write according to what is written, when you read the question carefully. So that's a must. Okay, in the answer, there's nothing great. It is from what is given in the procedure itself. After the electrodes had fitted, participants had to go off to sleep. Like I told you, think and write, it will be interesting for you. Some students will write after the electrodes were fitted, they were woken up from REM and NREM sleep. This happens when you're writing mindlessly, when you're not thinking, does it make sense what I'm writing? You fitted with electrodes and then they were woken. Where's the part that they went off to sleep? Write in a way that the person who's reading becomes easy for them to understand what's happening, not in a way that there are too many gaps and they have to keep on filling in the gaps. Do you like to read a story or a lesson in your psychology textbook where half the details are eaten up from between and then you can't make sense of one sentence to the next? Why would someone else like to read that way? Okay, so write completely. Okay, then there was a doorbell that was loud enough to wake them up, and then they had to report their dream if they had been dreaming into a recording device. Use of terminology putting out the fine details of exactly what was happening where, not leaving the examiner begging for what is being done exactly here. Like if I say they had to report their dreams, but I don't mention into the recording device, that leaves the examiner thinking, does she know that they had to write in a recording device, or did she assume that they had to report the dreams to the experimenter directly? Okay, so show your understanding. Excellent understanding is one of a very important criteria in Cambridge answers, which is repeated everywhere throughout the mark schemes. Have excellent understanding and show it in the paper. Okay, and sometimes the researchers would come to clarify some aspects of the participant's dream, so those type of details are mentioned. So what is important is that you meet the requirement of the question, write the procedure exactly from where they have asked, and yes, you make sure that if it's for 5 marks, you justify by giving 5 points, only making sure that they follow a logical order. Okay, I know I'm not reading out the answers much because the intention is not to read out the answers. That I'll put up on my website. I'll put the link in the pinned comment below, and in the description box from where you can download these answers. But you have to know how to write these answers. That's the only way of scoring well. You could download these answers, memorize them. It's not going to work out, trust me. Because if you're going to memorize this answer, and then you're going to memorize for 12 course studies, and for every research method that is out there, there are 9 research methods, and I think 11 or 12 methodological issues. Your assumption is that you have superhuman memory capacity if you intend to memorize everything. So whenever you're reading an answer on my website, I have not put it up with the intention that you should be memorizing it. That's when I've started making these videos, to also guide you through how these answers are written. Otherwise also, when I just put them on my website, the intent is not for you to memorize. The intent is you see and understand how the answer was written. There should always be only one question in your mind: how, not what. Okay, now a 10 marker can come from Dement and Kleitman, as it can come from any study. The phrasing of the 10 marker is standard. You always have to cover 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses of the named study. One of these strengths or weaknesses will be a named issue in the question. Means one of your points has to be about quantitative data. When they say this, they literally mean one of the 4 points. See, 2 strengths, 2 weaknesses is 4 points that you're going to cover. They mean any one of these 4 has to be about quantitative data. If you've learned your research methods well, you know that any issue in psychology, like be it quantitative data, serves as a strength as well as a weakness. There's never only a one-sided issue, that it is only a strength or it is only a weakness. Of course, the way something has been used in a study can make it only a strength or weakness. But quantitative data, in whichever study it is used, is such an issue that it can be looked at from both perspectives, a strength or a weakness. So it is up to you, out of these 4 points, in which 2 are strengths and 2 are weaknesses, how you want to deal with it. In my answer, I've taken it as a strength. In your answer, you could take it as a weakness and you would be equally correct. So there's no right or wrong way of dealing with the issue in this type of question. There is only your critical thinking that you have to showcase justifiably that gets you marks. There's no right or wrong. Okay, so again you need practice of writing. That's the key in everything. In fact, I've done a video previously. I forgot which study it was for. I'll just check. In that I have in the video marked one of my students' answers again in front of you. Just recently I had uploaded it. It was for the 𝗧𝗨𝗜𝗍𝗨 et al. Study. In that, in fact, I've also discussed, and in some of my posts on my website, how the 10 markers get marked. I have shown the table criteria also for marking. which shows like you should have excellent understanding and those things. Today I'm not doing that. I don't have that much time in this video, but I will discuss how this answer is written in format. So what I'm trying to say here is that the way you write your points and whether you justify them correctly or not, whether it shows your critical thinking or not, is what is going to get you marks. There is no one answer like this is only how you have to write quantitative data for Dement and Kleitman. Absolutely not. In fact, if you take quantitative data as a strength, even in that you could take it as a strength the way I have taken it. Like I have taken it in terms of objective comparisons. That's why it's a strength. Someone else could take it because it makes analysis easier by subjecting data to statistical analysis. Some could just take it for objectivity. Someone could take it for it is practical, quicker for researchers to analyze data that is quantitative. So many ways of looking at it as a strength also. So the way you score in a 10 marker or any evaluation question is by having the right critical thinking, justifying it correctly. I can't emphasize that enough. It is not about trying to be correct or again memorizing something. Oh, if quantitative data comes, this is how I have to answer. That just cannot be the approach for scoring well. Okay, so as far as they've asked about quantitative data, again, this is quite a long answer for me to read out entirely and discuss every point. So I'm just going to show you how it's written. Of course, I've used the 𝗶𝗾 format in writing. Again, I've discussed the 𝗶𝗾 format a lot in my recent videos. 𝗶𝗾 format is point, evidence, explanation, link. Again, it's a subject by itself, which I can't discuss too much. If you're interested, all over the web, you have people who have discussed 𝗶𝗾 format. Easily, you will find it. You have Professor Flanagan and Professor Cardwell's excellent books which talk about 𝗶𝗾, PET or 𝗶𝗾c format. Please go through that. Very helpful to learn how to write essays. The 𝗶𝗾 format is what I have followed throughout. I have not used the 𝗶𝗾c format because in AS you need not give counterpoints. That we do at A levels. So if in case you've seen my videos of A levels, because some students give both together and they watch both, I would like you to know that 𝗶𝗾 format is sufficient for AS. You don't need to give counterpoints. That's why I don't give. It is possible to give, it's just unnecessary. So I'm not giving it. So what we do in 𝗶𝗾 format is every paragraph that we write in an evaluation answer, we write it in the 𝗶𝗾 format. First we give a point. Giving a point means we say the strength of the study is this. So I've given strength of the study is quantitative data. Next we give evidence. Evidence meaning why are we saying that it's quantitative data? What's the proof? Because they calculated percentages of various things, and of course I have specified for what they have given percentages. The worst and the number one mistake students make in these answers is giving generic answers. So it is quantitative data, they calculated percentages. What did they calculate the percentages for is not mentioned. So that answer, they calculated frequencies or percentages, you could just lift off that paragraph and stick it to some other study, right? And it would fit there also. That's a generic answer which applies just about anywhere, any topic, this year, next year, anywhere. How are you talking about Dement and Kleitman in particular when you're giving a generic answer? So the first thing you do is make a point, then you give evidence that's specific to the study. Then you explain it. You explain why you're saying it's a strength or weakness. So I'm saying it's a strength because it helps objective comparisons. Again, of what? You have to be specific in every point. Objective comparison of what? Because objective comparison you could write anywhere. Which conditions, which groups? And then you link it back to the question. So how does this help? It helps because it increases the validity of the results. Okay, so that is how we keep on writing. In the next paragraph, I take another strength because the requirement is 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. Now, when it comes to 2 strengths, what is advisable is you write in the order which is given in the question. First cover your 2 strengths and then your 2 weaknesses. Of course, you could write a weakness, a strength, a weakness, anyhow, but that's not advisable. That's not an appropriate way of writing. Try to go by 2 strengths and weaknesses. These are not my suggestions, these are examiners' suggestions over the years. Also, try to pick up the named issue right at the beginning. Again, no force, you don't have to do it, but it's always preferred. So quantitative data was the named issue. Try to take it in the first paragraph itself, unless it's a weakness. Then take it as the first weakness in the 2 weaknesses paragraphs that you're going to have. So another strength is the use of a standardized procedure. Again, I need to give some evidence for why this is the case. So I've given examples of standardization. Yes, you can cut short the length. I know many of you are thinking the answer is long. I've given more examples. Even I show you an answer, I am going to make it long because I want to explain to you. I'm a teacher. When you write from a student point of view. So you cut short on the examples, there's no issue. The answer will come down in length. Of course, lots of things matter, your writing speed and all. Right now, I don't want to get into these things. One thing in general is, the more prepared you are for the exam, the less time it takes you to answer. That's for sure. So if it's taking you very long to answer the exams, you're not able to complete the paper, that's just because you're thinking a lot. And why you're thinking a lot? Because you did not prepare well, or you did not practice enough for writing the answers. There's no other reason. No one's hand or handwriting is slow. It's the thinking that is slow. Anyways, coming back to the answer. When it comes to standardization, you have to give examples. Students often confuse very badly between controls and standardization. And I'm sorry, I didn't take standardization as the point. I took controls. So students confuse between controls and standardization. So what I have written here are controls, such as participants were asked not to have alcohol or caffeine. It's a standardization also, in the sense that every participant is asked to do the same thing, not consume alcohol and caffeine before coming. So if I write it in that way, if I justify it in that way, then it stands for standardization and reliability. But if I justify it in the sense of which extraneous variable is controlled because of asking them not to have alcohol and caffeine, then it is a point on controls. Again, like I said right at the beginning, how you justify your points, how you make sense of your points, that is key for this reason. The same point can be approached in different ways for different issues. Have you related it correctly with your issue? Have you named the issue as controls, but you've explained how it is same for everybody, which is standardization? Don't goof up there. That's why knowing your core concepts properly, that is also very important. And then, as in the previous paragraph, after giving examples of control, I have shown why that is a strength, because if these controls were not there, specifically which issues would arise. I have explained that. And then I have concluded that paragraph or linked it to the question by saying that again, it increases internal validity. I take the same approach towards weaknesses. That is again the 𝗶𝗾 format. Weakness of the study is that it lacked mundane realism. This I have attributed to both the environment of the experiment and the artificiality of the way in which they were sleeping. And then I've explained why that is a problem, because then the same findings, which findings I have specified, those findings will not be applicable to real sleeping settings or the real way in which people dream, and that reduces ecological validity. One more mistake students make in the 10 markers is to confuse base concepts, basic things they've learned in research methods, not knowing the difference between ecological validity and internal validity. Don't make such basic mistakes. You're going to have to pay a heavy price this year and next year if you're not clear on simple things like what is internal validity, reliability, and ecological validity. Okay, so don't use one term for the other. These strengths and weaknesses are not interchangeable. If you could use the term validity, reliability, ecological validity anywhere, why do you think they're teaching you these concepts separately, or why have they developed separate concepts in the first place? Use your common sense and don't assume anything just to make things easy. Things can never be easy, you have to work hard. The last paragraph is about the last weakness. There was a small sample size in the study, as we know, It is a course study. We have to know exactly how many participants were. They have specified that very well. And then I've explained why it's a problem having a small sample size. I've related it to sleep patterns, how different sleep patterns might be found when a larger number of people is there, like in the population. And that reduces, we could say, population validity, or here you could use a term, generalizability, but that term is just broader. It could refer to the settings, or it could refer to sample to population applicability. Again, this year it's not a big issue if you use the term generalizability instead of population validity, but just to be clear, I've used this specific term. Okay, that's the 10 marker. If you found it little difficult to keep up to what I was saying in this answer, that is because either you have not read the answer yet. So again, I'll tell you, go on the website, read the answer and come, or at least know your content well before seeing this, or keep the answer alongside when you're seeing what I'm saying, so that you can pause in between, read what I'm referring to, and then you'll be able to make complete sense. Because what is, if I read out the whole answer, the video will become very long and I'm not having that much time. So this answer, one more question which is frequently asked, do we have to give introduction and conclusion? No, you don't have to give. That's why I have not written it. Okay, and let's come to the last two answers which I've taken up here. These are your typical paper 2 answers. In paper 2, some students assume only research methods are there. No doubt it is about research methods, but they can ask you about research methods and methodological issues in the context of case studies which are there. So there are a number of questions which refer to the case studies as well. Like one of the years they asked a question, outline one open question from the study by Dement and Kleitman. An open question is any question to which a detailed response can be given, and typically it begins with describe, explain, what, how, why, those type of words. So here I've taken a simple question, please describe the dream that you have experienced. It is not difficult to answer these questions, so I don't have anything much to advise on these, except for even after tremendous practice there are students who keep confusing between open and closed questions. In what respect they confuse is, how many dreams did you have? And they will insist that this is an open question because it begins with how. How many, how much are not open questions, they are closed. So if you get confused and you try to mug up, that's the issue. Understand the concept. An open question by definition is the one which can be answered elaborately. A closed question by definition is the one that can be answered in limit. So whenever you phrase a question, read it out to yourself in your mind. Assume you were the respondent. How would you have answered that question? If someone asks you how many dreams did you have, wouldn't you give a number for that? Wouldn't you say 5 dreams or something? Right? So then when you're just going to give a number, that's not an elaborate answer. So how can it be an open question? Okay, so think through things logically always. There's nothing else I have to advise here. Okay, maybe the last thing I could say is write a direct question, like I have put it in quotation marks. Don't write indirectly. Okay, these type of answers, they could have asked them about their dreams. You don't get marks for saying that. You have to show the question that they should have asked. And the last question, again I've taken from paper 2. This is one in which students make severe mistakes. Hypothesis. Many students hate hypothesis type of questions. Why? I don't know. They're very simple and very easy to score. Just because they are confusing between all types of hypothesis, so they hate them. Nothing to hate here. Practice well again. For a null hypothesis, you always have to give a statement of no difference if it's an experiment. This is an experiment, Dement and Kleitman. Know your templates or know your patterns of writing for your hypothesis. There is no difference. Always will begin that way for an experiment, between dash, which will be one condition, and then there will be dash, which is another condition, on dash, which will be the dependent variable, right? So know these formats and keep practicing them for all the studies, because it gives you good practice also and helps you prepare for the paper 2 course studies question. Okay, so null hypothesis will always begin with no difference between, and then here in the statement itself you can see the two conditions, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and the dependent variable is also the dream duration estimates. So actually you need not memorize anything for this answer, you just have to know how to rearrange and put it in a hypothesis. And of course to mention that any observed difference is due to chance, because of course when we are going to ask people to estimate that whether they've been sleeping for 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the means are not going to turn out to be exactly the same. That is very impossible. Of course there'll be a slight difference in their mean estimates, and that must be because of chance then in that case, right? That is what we'll assume in the null hypothesis. So again, your base concept of what is a null hypothesis needs to be clear. Why do we assume the differences between chance? If you think of it that way, you'll enjoy the course more. Okay, so for this question, my last piece of advice would be, again, be very direct. Give the answer in the correct format. Don't beat around the bush. The same thing will be said by one group and the other group. Instead of doing all that, like thinking so effortfully during the paper how to put null hypothesis and thinking, oh, it was not there in the textbook, and cribbing, instead of doing all those things, practice beforehand in one correct standard template. Just makes easier for you to write things. Of course you have to understand what's a null hypothesis. In your mind think that both the groups would perform the same and all, but don't write. For exam writing, have the correct template, the correct skill for writing on the paper. Okay, so just make your life easier by practicing more. It's a 2 marks question, answer directly. They've told you to write, means it's just like the state command term. They don't want you to get into details of why you've written it that way, what's a null hypothesis, what's the strength of writing this hypothesis, nothing. They just want to know how you would put it on the paper. So what else can I say? Okay, that's it for this lesson. As I told you, I will try to put such lessons for all the studies. If you have any comments or questions about this video, please leave it in the comments box below. I do answer. Please don't contact me otherwise to ask questions about this particular video. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in another class.